Minister?
Yes. Are you good, Mr. Chair?
No, as good as I'm going to get. All right, welcome back, committee members, and we'll begin our consideration of vote 31, Corrections, Policing, and Public Safety, subvote CP01, Central Management and Services. Minister Tell, you're here with your officials, and as a reminder to officials, please state your name for the record before you speak. Please don't touch the microphones. That's kind of a rule, huh? The handset operator will turn your microphone on when you speak, and Minister, please introduce your officials and make your opening comments.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got as you can see behind me, so this is going to take just a few minutes. I have Dale Larson beside me, Deputy Minister. Rob Cameron, I know where these people are. Once it gets back into the other ones, I'm not exactly sure. Rob Cameron, Assistant Deputy Minister. Heather Scriver, Assistant Deputy Minister of Custody Services. Joelle Aldridge, Director, Major Projects. Ray Gallivan, Executive Director, Police Contracts and Financial Services. Carolyn Graves, Executive Director, Community Corrections. Corey Leroy, Executive Director, First Nations Indigenous Policing. Mark McFadden, Executive Director in Custody Services. Noel McAvena, Executive Director, Provincial Disaster Assistance Program. Jeff Roden, Executive Director, Provincial Protective Services Branch. Jill Rowden, Executive Assistant, Corrections, Policing and Public Safety. And we have Merv Morin, Director of First Nations and Indigenous Policing. From the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency, we have Marlo Pritchard, President, Teresa Florazone, Vice President, Corporate Services, Michelle Broda, Executive Director, Finance and Corporate Services, and Chris Clement, Executive Director, Enterprise Projects and External Relations. From the Firearms Secretariat, we have the one and only Robert Freeberg, the Chief Firearms Officer. So he's here by himself, joining the rest of us. Integrated Justice, Drew Willoughby, Assistant Deputy Minister. Mindy Goodmanson, Executive Director, Strategic Portfolio and Fiscal Planning. Noel Bussey, Executive Director, Communications Branch. Monica Field, Executive Director, Strategic Systems and Innovation. And Aaron Orban, Executive Director, Access and Privacy Branch. Did you get all that? Yeah. Oh, excellent. Excellent. Okay. All right. What we're going to do, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, is that we'll have whoever is responsible and going to be speaking to a particular item, they're just going to come up here and speak in there instead of going up to the podium, if that's okay with you. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to be here to discuss the Ministry of Corrections, Policing, Public Safety's 22-23 financial plan and to answer any questions. I'm joined at the table by Daryl Larson, and of course I've introduced everybody before. We have a number of officials from the Ministry Firearms Secretariat and the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency. Our goals of providing safe communities, safe facilities, and safe and engaged employees takes a team far greater than what can be represented in this room. I want to recognize and thank all of our frontline staff for the tremendous work they have done throughout a very challenging year or years. They have served Saskatchewan citizens through their expertise, integrity, dedication to do what they do, and we are very grateful for their service. This budget aligns with our government's goal of protecting our province. This year, the Ministry of Corrections and Policing and Public Safety's budget has increased to $602 million, an increase of $39 million, or approximately 6.8%. Custody, supervision, and rehabilitation services has increased by approximately $4 million from last year to over $1.98 million this year. Policing and community safety services has increased by nearly $32 million to $304 million this year. Public safety, including the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency's budget, has increased by $2.5 million to nearly $98 million. We'll now highlight some areas of importance in this year's budget. Nearly $1.5 million in new funding will be devoted to the Saskatchewan crime suppression strategy, easy for me to say, including the development of the Provincial Protective Services branch. The province has made solid progress in decreasing provincial crime severity and overall crime rates over the last decade. Property crime is down by 12% this year. However, in the last 5 years, the province has seen a rise in organized street gangs, which has led to more illegal guns, drugs, and human trafficking coming into our province. We will expand the crime reduction team, as they have proven to be a useful tool in helping address immediate public safety concerns that communities are experiencing. There are now 9 teams. There are CMP teams in North Battleford, Prince Albert, Lloydminster, Moose Jaw, La Ronge, and Meadow Lake, and municipal police service teams in Regina, Saskatoon, and Prince Albert. Suppression of crime is heavily reliant on the collection and timely distribution of criminal intelligence. Criminal analysts are attached to each crime reduction team and share intelligence with other crime reduction teams in the province. We've also created a warrant enforcement and suppression team, otherwise known as WEST. The team is based in Saskatoon and Meadow Lake and works jointly with RCMP and municipal policing services. WEST is designed to target high-profile offenders and gang members with outstanding warrants. These offenders have capacity to commit additional crimes while in the community, which impacts our public safety. Warrant enforcement is the primary focus of this team, and it is deployable around the province. Saskatchewan Trafficking Response Team, otherwise known as START, will also receive funding in this budget. START will work on the enforcement and development of criminal intelligence specific to drugs, illegal weapons, and human trafficking. 4 offices will be strategically located in Lloydminster, Swift Current, Yorkton, and Estevan based on their proximity to provincial boundaries and established drug, firearm, and human trafficking corridors. These highly mobile teams will be ready to deploy anywhere in the province. As Assistant Commissioner Rhonda Blackmore recently stated at SUMA, these are important units that will have a direct impact in helping make our communities safer. We are also continuing to invest in the new Remand Centre build at Saskatoon Correctional Centre, with $27 million going towards this build this year. This is a 3-year project that will see the new building open in 2025. The increase in gang-affiliated and high-needs offenders has put strain on our existing infrastructure and requires us to invest in a new modern build that will allow us to house this population safely and securely. Urban camp replacement at Saskatoon Correctional Centre is also an integral part of this investment. Urban camp provides low-risk offenders the opportunity to work and reintegrate back into our communities. The investment of $5.894 million will ensure urban camp is able to continue operating and providing those opportunities for reintegration. This year also sees continued funding for the gang violence reduction strategy, which has a number of components. Saskatchewan Integrated Intelligence Group brings together intelligence and resources across agencies to ensure that intelligence about gang-affiliated individuals is being shared. The Drug and Substance Abuse Treatment Units are specialized partnerships with health professionals that are designed to address addictions issues and provide appropriate supports. It is referred to as DATSU, are now operational in Regina Correctional Centre, Prince Albert, Pine Grove, and one more unit will open in Saskatoon Correctional Centre this year. The community intervention model is being led by community-based partners in Saskatoon and Regina. To date, 273 individuals have been referred to the Community Intervention Model, or CIM program, since its inception in January of 2020. Currently, there are 119 clients actively participating in programming across the province. Provincially funded independent evaluation is being conducted by the University of Saskatchewan to determine the success of these programs in addressing gang activity and related issues in the province. The Firearms Secretariat will be resourced with a budget of over $2.5 million. A major part of the Secretariat's work going forward will be to increase awareness around firearm safety. This includes responsible firearm storage, ensuring the safety of licensed ranges, and reacting effectively and promptly to public safety concerns involving firearms. This year, we will provide $15.108 million in additional funding to the RCMP to support important initiatives such as the First Nations Policing Program. This funding will also provide for contractual increases to the RCMP. The 22-23 budget sees continued investment in the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency that is responsible for protecting people, property, and resources. Focusing on the 4 pillars of emergency management, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery, the agency works with communities to help them identify the risks and take actions to manage these risks. It also responds when an event occurs, most commonly wildfire, flooding, but also large-scale and province-wide emergencies. The agency's situational awareness team continues to monitor risks to the province, disseminate intelligence to other ministerial agencies, and Crown corporations. The SPSA actively shares information with stakeholders and partners like municipalities, First Nations, and first responders. It doubled up these efforts during the pandemic. As the province learns to live with COVID, the SPSA continues to provide rapid antigen test kits to over 600 locations across the province and remains ready to respond as required to any future needs. 2021 response season was especially busy for the agency as the province saw over 630 wildfires, more than double our 5-year average. Flooding remains a concern, and especially in light of what we're going to see here overnight and going forward. Depending on runoff, while drought and grass fires are a concern due to dry conditions in southern areas of the province. SPSA is working with communities and other agencies to mitigate risk and coordinate support for those that may be impacted. The agency's strength comes from working together to improve information flow and decision-making during such emergencies, which provides a more streamlined provincial response. Highly trained staff achieve this by utilizing the proven incident command system, which enhances interagency coordination and joint efforts. SPSA's 22-23 expense budget is $94.903 million compared to $92.373 million in 21-22. This is an increase, doing the math, of $2.5 million compared to last year. SPSA GRF operating grant is $76.792 million, an increase of $2.233 million due to the following increases. $200,000 increase for emergency preparedness and fire safety public education, $100,000 increase for First Nations and community evacuation planning, $196,000 for disaster mitigation adaptation fund projects, $1.937 million increase for centralized costs and supports related to IT, accommodations, and collective bargaining agreement salary adjustments, and $200,000 decrease for visual identity such as uniforms, vehicles, and signage. The Ministry of Corrections, Policing, Public Safety plays a vital role in our province. We have accomplished much this last year and will continue to work with our partners and the wider community to create positive outcomes for the people of Saskatchewan. Now, I would be pleased to answer your questions about the 22-23 plan and budget for the Ministry of Corrections, Policing and Public Safety and its associated entities. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Saar, any opening comments? And then the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for your opening comments. I'd like to join you in welcoming your officials here this evening. I said this afternoon, and I'll say it again for the folks who weren't here. Most of you folks weren't here. Last year's estimates, while it was nice, it was not nearly the same as it has been in the past, and was really sad that officials weren't able to be here for the past 2 years in the capacity that we have grown accustomed. I really enjoy the opportunity to speak with all of your officials, Minister, and hear about the work that they're doing. So I just want to express my gratitude for all of you for being here this evening, and I'm just really happy that we're able to resume estimates in the way that we have previous to the past 2 years, and I'm looking forward to the 2 and some now over 2.6 hours of conversation that we'll be having this evening.
Before you start,
yes.
The officials appreciate it, and so do we. But what we really want you to do is name all of them.
Hang on here. Hang on, Minister. This is apparently Lawyer Appreciation Day, so if there's lawyers in the room, I'm terribly sorry. Your day is over at 5 o'clock. So.
Yeah, the Minister of Justice indicated to us in his estimates that it's Be Kind to a Lawyer Day today. So we're hoping that the members of the committee who are lawyers will benefit from that. Minister, I'm going to start with a question that I asked the Minister of Justice this afternoon, and he indicated that this was actually more through the Ministry of Corrections and that I should direct my question to you. As you recall, after the death of Kimberly Squirrel, who, after she left, as you know, left Pine Grove, passed away, there was from what I understand, an internal investigation and recommendations that flowed out of it between both, well, I thought both corrections and justice. Justice informs me that it's mostly corrections, so I'm wondering if you could provide me, Minister, with what the outcome of that investigation was and what were the recommendations as a result.
What is this supposed to look like? Oh, don't touch it. So the words "don't touch it" mean nothing to me? I thought I had to. Well, okay, whatever.
I just said that about the officials. You're touch away.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm not listening to him. So, yes, and of course, I'm going to have Heather Scriver come up. She was intimately familiar with this particular dreadful incident, and but first off, I must say our deepest condolences to Kimberly Squirrel's family and her loved ones, and we're hopeful that we hope that we won't see this type of thing again. But anyway, Heather Scriver, ADM of Custody Services. Ah, yeah. Okay, she's going to take over.
Good afternoon. I'm Heather Scriver. So in regards to Kimberly Squirrel, and as Minister Tell indicated, condolences to the family, and this provides an opportunity for us to dispel some of the myths that were out there surrounding this situation with Kimberly. The investigation into Pine Grove Correctional Center handling of Miss Squirrel's release was completed in November. It found that staff ensured her safety and well-being through the release process, and that Miss Squirrel had safe transportation to Saskatoon, as well as appropriate clothing for the weather upon her release. The investigation also found that Crown Counsel and Defense Counsel followed established practices. Ms. Squirrel provided the address to where she was ordered to reside, indicating it was a home of a relative. Prosecutions and legal aid staff made steps to confirm the address provided by the offender for their release conditions, depending on the circumstances. The Crown saw no cause for concern about the address provided by Ms. Squirrel. The Saskatchewan Coroner's Service was in contact with Ms. Squirrel's family throughout the coroner's investigation. The Coroner's Service remained available to respond to any questions and to provide clarification to the family on the cause and manner of death. Investigative reports are considered confidential. There are a number of privacy and security issues that must be taken into account when conducting an investigation, including sensitive information about the individuals involved. There were no recommendations made in the report. Ministry officials met with members of Ms. Squirrel's family earlier this year. Out of respect for Ms. Squirrel's family, we will not be providing any additional details about what was discussed during that meeting.
Thank you. Let's speak a bit about the release process that you mentioned. So what steps are taken by those at corrections when an inmate is released?
Fadden, Executive Director of Custody Services, will provide the response.
Don't touch, right?
Don't touch.
Right.
Keep your hands
Hi,
flat.
good evening. In regards to Ms. Squirrel, once again, our condolences go out to the family. So in regards to the release of Ms. Squirrel, and without getting into too great of specifics, the order of her release is not defined or developed by corrections. That was done in the courts with the lawyers. So we abide by the release order that we received on her, and that was all done through video court. So upon release for the individual, she was afforded the telephone, which she took advantage of. She was prepared for release. Transportation was arranged. Staff ensured that she had her property, and as ADM Scriver suggested, that she was released with appropriate clothing, both on her person and in her belongings. She was taken to paid transportation services that was paid for by corrections, and took the transportation to Saskatoon. Now, post that, we don't have information, and that might be questions that would be better served maybe for the police or somebody else. But appropriate release protocols for Ms. Squirrel and any other offender that was released were followed, and I would say that in this case in particular, staff went above and beyond in ensuring that Ms. Squirrel was prepared appropriately for release and released safely, at least while she was in our care.
What are, generally speaking, not just specific to Ms. Squirrel's instance, but generally speaking, what are the release protocols?
Well, for a video court release, which typically will have two types of release, if someone's released from court or video court, they will be provided transportation if required, Typically, our policy speaks to that we try to have the offender be responsible for their own release plans. Sometimes it's difficult when it's such short notice type of release. So we ensure appropriate transportation is provided, that they're provided appropriate clothing upon release, given the weather conditions. We have items in stock should they require them, if they don't have it in their personal property. Access to telephone to arrange either for transportation on their own or residence upon discharge. And like I said, in this case specific, those were all done through the court, not through corrections.
You mentioned that corrections has items in stock that they can be provided to inmates
Correct.
when they're released. Can you describe what those are?
Yeah, most of those items would be more for winter wear. We have jackets that we have that we would provide to an offender who didn't have appropriate winter weather clothing to be released on. And we would also release them if they didn't have appropriate shoes. We would release them with shoes, institutional shoes that we would have. But we wouldn't open the door in inclement weather and say, there you go.
One of the challenges that flowed out of the conversation that resulted from Miss Squirrel's death was around the gap in connecting those flowing through the correctional system and social services. Did the ministry in their review look at that at all as a potential recommendation?
There were recommendations.
Has the ministry looked into the gap between offenders leaving facilities and being able to connect to social assistance?
So if we're not speaking specifically to the squirrel file, which obviously to answer this appropriately, we're not, there are, just through the general case management process of an offender and planning for the release, if there's the requirement or the need to link social services in, whether it be for funding upon release or other agencies even outside of social services, whether it be for obtaining identification, et cetera. Those would be done through the whole case management process and the reintegration process. We have reintegration officers in our facilities, dedicated in the facilities, that would also assist in the reintegration of an offender and making sure that to the best of their ability and the best of the resources that are available, that they can connect offenders with certain resources on the release.
How many dedicated reintegration officers are there in facilities right now?
For the big four, Pine Grove Correctional Center, PA Correctional Center, Regina, and Saskatoon, there's one employed by us in each of the facilities. We've also recently developed partnerships with Saskatoon Tribal Council, specifically, at least right now, in the Saskatoon region, both for Saskatoon Correctional Center, the reintegration units in Urban Camp. They have some urban navigators that they're titled. They all equally assist in, at least right now in Saskatoon, with that process for us as well, too.
So just,
And,
sorry.
Sorry. Ms. Scriber reminded me of one other partnership. We have a partnership contract with Elizabeth Fry, who help us significantly at Pine Grove, equally with the same agenda, reintegration into the community. And they provide assistance in support networks in the community, transportation, linking individuals up with residents, things like that.
So just to be clear, for PA and Regina, there is one reintegration officer who's tasked with doing reintegration planning for every offender in that facility?
So as much as they're the reintegration officer for that facility, it's the responsibility of the caseworkers who work with the offenders, in particular the sentenced offenders, for the reintegration planning. The reintegration officer is there to assist and take a key role in that, but it's not singularly their responsibility at all. They're there as a lead in the process, but it's definitely a case management process and a case management responsibility to prepare or assist an offender in preparing for the release if they're so obliging with the activity.
When you say caseworkers, do you mean people who are separate from correctional officers, or is that a role that the correctional officers do?
Correctional officers, depending on the correctional officer's role, if they're assigned to a sentenced unit, there's going to be more case management and more reintegration planning going on than maybe a remand unit where an individual's here today, gone tomorrow's type thing. Yeah.
Does the ministry have data on how often the reintegration officers are connecting offenders to social services?
We don't have numbers specifically to reintegration officers connecting with social services. Sometimes it's phone calls that occur just at the unit level by a case manager, et cetera. We do have numbers on our reintegration leaves as far as offenders who are granted offender reintegration leaves. But we don't have, if you're talking about how many touch points occurred between corrections and social services in the release of an offender, we don't have statistics to provide.
Is that not tracked or just not available right now?
I think it'd be fair to say we don't track that.
What about assisting offenders with being able to get ID, for example, can be a challenge?
Yeah. We will. What am I missing?
Oh, I touched the microphone
Oh, did you?
again.
Other ones
And anyway, I think where you're going in this process, I think your questions may be more aptly answered by Drew Willoughby in the Back to Basics with respect to the remand. There's a lot of those types of answers to what you're asking for right now. It's really, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
So are you, I mean, we can have Drew come up?
I'm happy for an all of the above approach with
Okay.
answering my questions.
Mark.
So whoever wants
You
to.
did a great job, Mark.
Don't talk about
I
ID
think
then?
your minister just benched you.
Okay. You want to talk first off about ID and stuff?
If you'd like me to.
Yeah, you can. And then Drew will come up.
Yes, we can help with ID if the offender so obliges. They can initiate the process too on their own. They don't need necessarily, assist by everybody, but we do assist with ID, especially with our offender employment coordinators that we have in our facilities. In particular, again, the Big Four. Part of their responsibility would be to assist individuals to get ID. So we do assist in that process, and offenders do obtain ID while they're incarcerated.
Do you, before we get to Mr.
No, I don't.
No data points on that, and that's not tracked at this time?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. I don't know if Mr. Willoughby wants to
Okay, Drew,
add to.
Done?
just don't touch the
I
microphone.
don't know, it's up to the minister.
Thanks, Mark.
Drew Wilby, Assistant Deputy Minister of Community Engagement. Thanks for the question, and I think what you've highlighted is a key part of what we've discovered in terms of the reintegration side. And we know that through our work around remand that we have a custody population that continues to cycle through our system. And what we're focusing on is those reduced returns to custody. A lot of the issues that you put on the table there and what Mark has talked about are what we're seeing. And so it's why we move forward on the Back to Basics program, and in particular with female offenders. I wouldn't say the situation around Ms. Squirrel specifically drove us there, but it was definitely a considering variable as we moved ahead. And what we've seen is a fairly significant jump in our female population since 2015, about a 240% jump. And so we decided to wrap a program around them. We put it out to request for proposal. And basically what it is to have CBO partners design the solution. Again, what I talked a little bit about earlier is that outcome-based process. Rather than us prescribing, here's where we want the knife, the fork, the spoon, the plate, the cup on the table, we'll come back and see that the table's set and measure those outcomes. And that's things like driver's licenses, things like connection to social assistance, pieces like connection to education, housing, and all of those. And starting small. We know it's a bite-sized chunk approach. We can't boil the ocean or solve all these problems overnight, but starting small and starting to put those pieces together, but in particular using the expertise of our CBOs to do it. Out of that, we're hoping to have some of those metrics that you've talked about. How many individuals have we connected to service? In particular, what service? Where do those gaps continue to be? So we're starting down that journey. It's going to be a bit of a road to get there, but we're hopeful that the program will be up and running by the fall, if not early winter.
Okay, so the program's not operational yet?
No, we just, the RFP closed last week. So we've received, I believe, I'm not telling stories out of school, but we've received 7 responses. I can't say who they are, but we're hopeful. It's a fairly complex group of individuals there that have provided a response to that. So we're hoping to evaluate that in fairly short order and then further let a contract out for that and run it as a pilot to see how it goes. Yeah. It's about $1 million, so it's good money.
I've heard from CBOs who are very interested in that project. It's hard to talk about it because it's not quite operational yet, so I'm trying to think of useful questions that will help further this conversation. When speaking with, you're talking specifically about female offenders. When I speak with those in policing, in particular, they talk about how the drug crisis is leading to that increase specifically in the female offender population. Will Back to Basics be addressing that issue as well?
Talk a bit about that, and then maybe I'll have Heather weigh in on some of the pieces specific to facility and where we are there, the DATSUs and other great work that's going on. The short answer is yes. As we looked and we saw that spike in the female population, the first question is, well, what's driving that, right? Why is that interesting? What's moving that up? And you're right, drugs are a big piece of that, especially meth on the streets around 2014-15 and the escalation of that. And so considering those pieces and how best to wrap support and service. Again, I'll let Heather talk to what's going on in facility, but once individuals are out, further connecting them to those services and making sure through whether it be the Saskatchewan Health Authority, CBO partners, maybe it is the Canadian Mental Health Association or others that are working through some of those pieces and continuing to connect those offenders to that service, and then work with them as we go along. We know it's going to be that continuous intervention that's going to be the only way to get them through that. So
DATSU is for sentence offenders, but Back to Basics is for remanded offenders or all offenders?
Leaving facility. So it could be applicable to remand. It could be applicable to sentenced. Not to get too long into data, but what we're seeing is there's a group that's coming in. They're getting remanded, largely because of previous offenses, so they're offending at a lower rate. They're ending up being remanded. They're going to court, and they're getting time served. They're getting released. They're spending about 193 days a year with us. Corrections can't do anything with that. When they're remanded, they're holding and trying to ensure community safety and move through. So it's other factors that are playing out to get those individuals there. And so wrapping service once they're out in the community where they're best addressed, and some of those CBO partners can provide it. That's where Back to Basics is focused.
Okay. And so Back to Basics is essentially helping corrections connect those leaving facilities with the supports that exist in the community. That's correct?
Correct, and using the community-based partners to do it rather than government to do it, and hopefully reducing the remand churn and the numbers coming back into facilities. So we can reduce those returns to custody. In essence, we reduced our custody population.
Thank you. So specifically with respect to addictions treatment in the community, what sort of programs, organizations would the successful RFP proponent for Back to Basics be able to refer leaving offenders to?
Part of that would be in conjunction with our partners in health. We're happy that there's $200,000 as part of Back to Basics that's come from the mental health and addictions area of health. And so both the ministry and the Saskatchewan Health Authority are committed to working with us and whoever that CBO partner is. It will depend a little bit where they're released to. I mean, if it's Saskatoon, Regina, PA, there's more services than, say, Black Lake. But we need to work that through. And again, rely on those CBO partners to figure some of that out. That was what I would call, choose my word carefully, but the beauty of the RFP is, design it and figure out what that looks like. Similar to what we talked to with First earlier today, kind of connecting those pieces that are out there in the specific communities. But again, we would rely on our partners in health to work through some of that with us, but we do have $200,000 in funding from them.
Before we get to DATSU, this program is specific for Pine Grove. Am I wrong on that, or is there a plan to expand? I'm just wondering if this will be province-wide, or if it's going to be looking at a specific area and then the hopes of expanding if it's successful. I'm just wondering what the growth of the program will be.
No, absolutely good question. It's a pilot specific to Pine Grove, potentially to White Birch. I wouldn't think so as much because there's not the population there to deal with, and that's more sort of the remand churn and up. If successful, and we're hopeful it is, with everything we do, we build an evaluation onto it rather than just saying, okay, let's continue on. Let's see if it actually is doing what we want it to do. And again, if the CBOs thinks it's working, with lessons we learned from CAR is that CAR wasn't working for the CBO partners. It wasn't working to what they had expected, and so they wanted more ability to be flexible. If successful, hopefully we can move into the men's facilities as well. But we have to start somewhere, and we think the females are a very captive audience because of how susceptible they are to changes in the system.
And just so that I understand, I'm assuming CAR means the previous remand strategy, but could you tell me what that means?
Sorry, that was the Community Alternatives to Remand
Yes,
program
okay, so
as part of the previous piece. So this is repositioning some of that money into Back to Basics.
The previous remand strategy.
Correct.
Yes, I was hearing that challenge from CBOs as well. This funding, is it the successful RFP proponent, is it for a certain amount of years, this funding, or is it just for this next calendar or budget year?
No, we have $1.2 million per year for the next 3 years.
Okay.
So it's a 3-year pilot. It would be silly to do it for 1 year. It's likely not going to get up and running. So, yeah. And then at the end, we'll evaluate it.
Okay, thank you.
Betcha.
Let's chat DATSU.
But just before we chat DATSU,
Sure.
Heather Scriver, I just want to say that Back to Basics can also be recognized in our women's reintegration unit. You would know it as our community training residences at Saskatoon too, so that's a population that it will involve as well. So in regards to our dedicated substance abuse treatment unit, and Minister mentioned it in her opening comments, we do have, and they're called DATSU, in corrections, everything is an acronym, right? So the DATSU is being implemented at Pine Grove Correctional Centre, or it has been implemented at Pine Grove Correctional Centre, Prince Albert Correctional Centre. It will be implemented at Saskatoon Correctional Centre, and it's been operational at the Regina Correctional Centre since 2008. The evaluation in 2008 has demonstrated that it is very successful in terms of reducing recidivism and contact with the criminal justice system. So we do know that substance abuse is one of the contributing factors to our offending, and research indicates that effective treatment for substance abuse reduces the likelihood of reoffending. The dedicated inpatient addictions unit at Regina Correctional Centre has a capacity for 20 incarcerated offenders. Referrals are also accepted from other facilities in the province, but those are diminishing now that we have up and running units at the other men's facilities. The program is 5 weeks long with structured programming running daily, Monday through Friday. The overall goals and outcomes for this initiative for offenders, families, and communities are reduced involvement or harm associated with alcohol and or drugs, improved physical or psychological health, and family and or social functioning. And again, like I said earlier, it actually reduces involvement with the criminal justice system. This evidence-based treatment program is based on best practices methodology as outlined by Canada Health, Corrections, Policing and Public Safety, the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse, and the Ministry of Health. The conceptual models used in DATSU are motivational interviewing, the trans-theoretical model on behavioral change, and criminal lifestyles in training. The program consists of standardized and validated assessment tools for the evaluation of treatment suitability and motivation, pre- and post-evaluation tools to test the integrity of the program, a criminogenic risk need analysis, treatment modalities that include cognitive behavior therapy, relapse prevention, problem-solving skill development, goal-setting exercises, motivational interviewing, the trans-theoretical model of behavioral change, and the process groups to facilitate self-reflection and internalization of new thinking and behavior. And also there is aftercare and post-treatment support. The offenders also participate in the cultural programming within the facility, chaplaincy, and the life skills programming that enhances their outcome for treatment. The evaluation of the program demonstrated participants had a statistically significant lower rate of recontact with corrections at the 6, 12, and 20-month post-release dates. DATSU participants who come in contact with corrections post-release took longer to have recontact than the control group. DATSU the DATSU program has recently been reviewed and revised by Pine Grove by expert consultants, the Galvanizing Equity Group. This revision has tailored the DATSU program to be more gender and trauma-informed, specific for female offenders. So just a little bit number of the breakdown since December 2021, because I know you're going to ask. I know, yeah. So at RCC, the capacity is 20 participants per program cohort, and it's busy, and we have a wait list for the program. So right now, the current wait list at RCC is 121 offenders. So it's a very popular program. Since 2017, we started with 17 participants. They completed the program. 4 had to be removed for various reasons. But fast forward to 2021, we've had 78 participants complete at RCC alone. Pine Grove, it started November 2020. There's 11 participants per program cohort. There's no offenders right now on the waiting list, and we've had 54 participants at Pine Grove complete the program. So that's really exciting. PACC, they have 13 participants per program cohort, and they have a current waiting list of 31 offenders. And they have 48 participants have completed. And of course, COVID impacted a little bit of our programming at the facility. So if we didn't have COVID, I'm sure the numbers would be, I know the numbers would be higher.
Sorry, that last number, was that PA?
Prince Albert Correctional Centre, yeah.
Do you have numbers for Saskatoon? Did I miss Saskatoon?
No, it hasn't opened.
Hasn't opened yet,
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, I was paying attention.
Yeah, and I just want to say that through federal funding for the GVR gang violence reduction strategy, the DATSU program has been implemented just due to the funding that we got from the federal government.
When will the Saskatoon unit be operational?
That will be dependent on the remand build at this point in time. I stand corrected. May. It will be operational in May.
Do the units require additional staffing?
They're staffed by SHA staff as well as our correctional officers, and they have a staffing component that's a little bit more generous than the regular units in the facilities, yes.
And the statistics you mentioned on the success of the Regina DATSU program, what year was that study done?
Of Regina?
Yeah, I think that's when you talked about how they're statistically significantly less likely to
It was
reoffend.
evaluated. I don't see in my notes when it was evaluated. It would have been probably 5 years out, right? It takes that long for the evaluation. I don't have that with me right now.
Thank you. We've talked about this many times in estimates, the success of the DATSU program. Really happy to see that it's expanding this fiscal, and hopeful that it can help more in offenders and result in less inmate population than we've been seeing over the past several years.
Agreed.
It was just mentioned, and I know I was remiss last estimates because we ran out of time to talk about the remand center. So let's talk about the remand center. Where's construction at? Is a good way to start, I think.